My name's Megan Bowden. I'm a ranger with the National Parks based here at Tumut. We're going to talk about Brooks Hut and Harveys Hut, and they're on the eastern edge of Happy Jack's Plain, just to about 20 kilometres west of Adaminaby in what we call the central area of Kosciuszko National Park. Yes, a bit more challenging to get to, but still very popular. So you've got the really steep, rugged fall down the western side of the park, and then you come up onto these, what we call these high plains. So they've got nice rolling countryside of nice treeless plains, which are really nice for walking or riding in. And then the mountains then rise up again towards Jagungal, and then as you go further south up onto the main range. So it's quite nice rolling countryside. Beautiful views over Yukonbean as well. So on the eastern side, the country drops down into Yukonbean Dam, and you get amazing views out to the east as well towards Cooma and Berriedale Way. So Brooks and Harveys Hut, they were both built for grazing in the mountains. So Brooks Hut was built about 1943 by Bill Brooks, who was a carpenter by trade, and for Harry Reid. And those two had a lease in the area called K12 for grazing of sheep. And they also built the hut with Harry's son Alan. So he helped by carting the stone for the foundations. He put them on a slide, so this was dragged behind some horses. And that was basically built for sheep grazing. They used to walk the sheep up to the mountains into that lease about early December each year, and then back down in mid-April. They talked about, look, it was a great life. They did like it, working with the stock in the mountains, but they said it was pretty harsh as well. So they had many a tale getting stuck in the snow and when the weather changed quickly, because it can still snow in the middle of summer in the mountains. The rebuild team with Peter and Roger, they talked about, yes, getting caught it often would snow or rain or freezing temperatures as well. So yes, when they were building the hut, they talked many of times of trying to defrost the hands and defrost water that they'd had in bottles and things. It was all frozen, so they'd have to get them defrosted before they started work. This is Brooks number 3, because we lost Brooks in 2003 bushfires. So we've actually used fire retardant treatments of the timber, and we've tried to reduce any gaps and things like that to stop embers getting in. So the Brooks Hut's actually built on the site of the original hut. When we're rebuilding huts, we try not to put it on the same site so people can still see that this is a rebuild, not the original site. But because of the nature of the place and because the fireplace and the footings were still there, decision was made to rebuild it on the same site. So yes, the stones that there were the stones from Brooks Hut number 1. There's timber for these huts as well as other huts in the program have come from trees that were burnt during the 2020 bushfires, and they were felled due to risk reduction works. So I think it's a nice connection with the trees that were burnt during the fires we were able to reuse into the huts, so they've got that nice story with them as well. So we've used local timber millers to mill some of these timbers for us as well. So they've got that, now developed that connection with the place as well. They've come to some of the openings with their family and to see some of these huts as well. Yes, so a lot of the corrugated iron have come from people's property, so people had them coming off old sheds and things like that, and once they knew that we were on doing the rebuild program, they contacted us and said, we've got some iron here you'd like to use. So it's been wonderful that people have been able to donate that iron to us, and we've been able to reuse them on the huts, and they've got that nice character now, so it keeps that same look of the huts that people so much love. So basically they're 2 leases next to each other, so they would have been helping each other. Often when they were moving stock into the mountains, they'd group them all together, box them up they call it, and they'd all walk the mobs up together, and then once they got up to the leases they'd separate them into each of their leases. So they'd work together, and I'm sure the stockmen would have been working together or calling in on each other if they needed some flour or a cup of tea or a chinwag as well. So they're only about 3 k's apart, so they're basically the next valley over.
Okay, well I'm Steve Newby.
I'm Phil Newby, Steve's brother.
And we're at the site of Harveys Hut in the Happy Jack's Valley, headwaters of the Happy Jack's Creek, which burnt down in 2019-20. Well, I'm not sure which day it was. It was right on
New Year's.
It was close to the New Year. So the National Parks have very kindly been rebuilding the huts. And it's now the turn for Happies. The National Parks have done a wonderful job on the huts around here. I'm sure this will be just as good, if not better.
We're involved with the Kosciuszko Huts Association, KHA. So Steve is the caretaker for this hut.
Yeah.
Has been right through from about
late 90s.
Yeah, late 90s.
Yeah, so, and caretaking really is pretty easy. It just means we come in about once a year, check the place out, make sure if there's any work needs done. If it's very short work, we can do it. If it's anything significant, then we get back to the national parks and schedule a formal working party to do that work. A rebuild is a much bigger exercise. Well, all the huts have usually got local family connections.
Yeah.
I guess with Bryce Boots coming up, that was...
Yeah, Bryce Boots came up one weekend, this was a few years back. He was one of the members of the family that used to come up here with the cattle during the summertime, so when he was a boy. And he died a few years ago,
He did.
in his 90s when he died. So that gives you a sense of how far we're going back. And there are even some great black and white photos with him standing on the old veranda at the front there. And so you're talking about history, that's really what it's all about, that heritage.
We brought him up,
and
brought him in.
He was so chuffed to come back. He was just over the moon. Yeah, he loved being here.
We are really not doing much at all, right? We might be the caretakers, we're volunteers, but we're not skilled like these guys are, the tradies that work on this stuff. Fires notwithstanding, this is good for another 100 years.
Happy's Hut was about the sixth hut on our rebuild program, so we just completed Sawyers, Delanys, Vickerys, and Bradley O'Brien's, and then and 4 Mile, and then we started working on Happy's Hut. Aboriginal people have been in that area for thousands of years, and then about 1830s the first explorers came through looking for areas for grazing stock and for possible mining areas. And then about 1860s is when the gold rush started at Kosciuszko. So there were people coming to the area looking for gold, and also the leases, people were grazing stock. So Happy's Hut was just to the east of Brooks Hut, and it was built about 1931. It was a relatively small lease. They used to sort of have about 500 sheep. The stock were often transported as far west as Dubbo, and they were doing it tough out west with droughts. This was seen as a vital way of keeping their stock alive. Wool was worth quite a bit of money then, and so it was worthwhile for them to transport the sheep that far. Grazing above 1370 metres stopped about 1958 when they were looking at the protection of the catchments for the start of the Snowy Mountains scheme. So yes, grazing continued from those 1830s up to about 1958 in that area. Early surveyors and geologists stayed in Brooks Hut and Happy's Hut when they were starting to build the Snowy scheme. So they've got that ongoing connection, these many layers you get from grazing and snowy days through to people using them later for skiing and recreating as well. So it's fun to go exploring and see what you can find.
So I'd like to acknowledge the First Nation peoples whose land we stand on today and pay our respects to those elders past, present and emerging.
So we had Brooks descendants who've travelled from Darwin, from the coast, from out west up Griffith Way. So it was wonderful to see the descendants of Bill Brooks as well as Harry Reid as well.
They've done a perfect job. It looks really good, and the fireplace, the stone fireplace, is the original, I think, by Harry Reid. So no, it's perfect. It's really good.
I just really want to acknowledge Megan, Roger and Peter for all the work they've done rebuilding these huts. This round of rebuilds has just been so effortless for us from a KHA point of view. Megan's run this program so seamlessly, it's been amazing. So I really think we should give them a round of applause. But yeah, it's such a wonderful spot, so thanks so much for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Why is it always
Definitely, we hope for another 100 years. So from walkers, skiers, riders, whether they're bike riding or horse riding, very much everyone who's visited one of these huts appreciates the shelter they can provide in rough weather, as well as a visitor destination. So, and that's sort of that living museum. You can sort of still feel the history associated with these places when they visit these huts.
I reckon every hut they do is just slightly better than the previous one. And this is one of the most recent ones, so it's got to be one of the better.
Look, I really appreciate the help the National Parks builders, Roger and Peter, have done. They've got a passion with these buildings and trying to build them as close as they can to what they were like before. And they love getting the photos out and trying to get the detail with these places, as well as all the volunteers that have come along to help as well. From the caretakers, and we had Chumit bushwalkers helping, volunteers from the Kosciuszko Huts Association helped me try and track down the family descendants and those who've got associations with the hut. So people are usually very keen to find out that their hut that their family was involved in is being rebuilt, and they're keen to find out more and learn about some of the history of their families. And so yeah, it's wonderful to see yes, the families associated with it.
Thank you.